Welcome to the Federal Fiscal Year 2023 Nonprofit Security Grant Program Application Assistance Informational Meeting. We're just giving attendees a few minutes to log into the presentation, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Federal Fiscal Year 2023 Nonprofit Security Grant Program Application Assistance Informational Meeting. To make sure that everyone can see and hear the presentation, all participants will be muted for the duration of the presentation. You'll notice a box to your right where you can check your audio and where you'll be able to type in questions to ask us throughout the presentation. We will try to respond to all questions at the end of the session. If you do not receive a response by then, we may need to research your question and get back to you. We will send all participants a copy of today's presentation and the questions and answers by the end of the week. We're very pleased to announce we have a very special guest with us today, our FEMA Program Officer, Dennis Donahue, who will provide additional guidance for us. I'm Sonia Shai, and I've been managing the Nonprofit Security Grant here at OGR for the past several years. I also manage the Homeland Security Grant Program and assist with other state and federal public safety grants in the office. I'm very pleased to introduce our Homeland Security staff members. We have our Division Chief, Ben Pasadlo, Program Coordinators, Tricia McGuirk, Vicky Maboka-Boya, Kayla Toner, and our new Program Coordinator, Brian Nichols. Today, we'll provide an overview of the Federal Fiscal Year 2023 Nonprofit Security Grant Program to assist you with a successful application process. Ben?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Sonia. My name is Ben Posadlo. I'm the Homeland Security Division Chief here at the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, Office of Grants and Research. I want to welcome you to our FY23 NSGP Massachusetts informational webinar on behalf of Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, Secretary Terrence Reedy, and Undersecretary of Homeland Security Jean Benacasa Thorpe, and our Executive Director Kevin Stanton. We're very grateful to each of you for your attention to the security and safety of our nonprofit organizations, whether they be faith-based, healthcare, educational, or other human service-oriented nonprofits that are at high risk for terrorism or violent extremism. The partnership of the Commonwealth with our nonprofits and our whole community partners is essential towards making Massachusetts a more safe and secure community. And we're grateful to each of you. I want to give a special thanks to Sonia Shire, Division Manager, and our entire OGR team for their attention to this program, their experience. You can count on them for their support and assistance. They're fantastic. And we look forward to a very close partnership with our applicants and ultimately our awardees. And I also want to also give a very special thanks to our FEMA Grants Officer, who's indispensable to us in our partnership with FEMA and the federal government in delivering this superb program. Thank you very much. And that's Dennis Donahue.
Thank you, Ben. Dennis?
Yes, Sonia, I just want to thank you for the invitation to help present your informational meeting today. In the past several years, this program has grown exponentially, and we at FEMA are excited about the new opportunities and for nonprofits to continue to receive assistance from the federal government in making their facilities safer for their members and the public. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Tricia?
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We're excited. I think I've probably interacted with a lot of you through the last few years on the nonprofit security grants, and I'm pleased that you're here, and I hope that you gather a lot of information today. We're happy to work with you.
Thank you. Vicki?
Hi, everyone. Like Patricia, some of you might know me already. We have been working for the past, I think, 3 years on a nonprofit security grant, be it Commonwealth or the federal one. So I hope this presentation will be helpful to you, and you can really grab every information you can get to submit a successful application. Thank you.
Thank you. Kayla?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kayla Choner, and I'm the Program Coordinator 2 here at OGR's Homeland Security Division, and I'm very grateful and honored to be with you all today. And thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you. Brian?
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Nichols. New person on board here. I've been here about 5 weeks with OGR EOPSSS, and basically I'm going to be the lead program coordinator on this nonprofit security grant program. So I'll be the point of contact. My information is listed at the end of the presentation, and look forward to working with everyone, and welcome aboard.
Thank you, Brian. So our agenda today will be an overview of the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. We'll look at eligibility, funding guidelines, evaluation criteria, the application process, helpful tips, some NSGP resources. We'll have a question and answer period, and we'll give you the information for your program contact. The Nonprofit Security Grant Program provides funding support for physical, cybersecurity enhancements, and other security-related activities for nonprofit organizations that are at a high risk of terrorist or other extremist attack. This is a reimbursable grant program. The Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security is the only entity in Massachusetts that may submit the federal fiscal year 2023 NSGP applications, also known as investment justifications, directly to the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA. All applications for the federal fiscal year 2023 NSGP funding must be submitted to EOPS OGR by the deadline of Friday, April 14th, 4 p.m. Final award decisions are made by DHS and FEMA, not EOPS. Eligible Massachusetts NSGP applicants are 501c3 nonprofit organizations at high risk of a terrorist or other extremist attack. The NSGP UA, which is UASI, applicants must be located in the Metro Boston Urban Area Security Initiative, which are the jurisdictions of Boston, Cambridge, Chelsea, Everett, Quincy, Revere, Somerville, Brookline, and Winthrop. So if your facility is in any of those cities or towns, you would apply under the NSGP UA. The NSGPS, which is state, applicants are located outside of a UASI designated area. So all cities and towns outside of the UASI area. Funding guidelines. NSGP allowable costs are focused on physical security enhancements and security related training and awareness. Funding can be used for the acquisition and installation of security on real property, including buildings and improvements owned or leased by the nonprofit organization, specifically in prevention of and or protection against the risk of terrorist or other extremist attack. And allowable cost categories are listed in our federal fiscal year 23 NSGP notice of funding opportunity. Some examples of projects are access control equipment, surveillance equipment, cameras, impact resistant doors and gates, intrusion detection sensors and alarms, exterior lighting, physical perimeter security, fencing walls, jersey barriers, screening and inspection systems, backup computer hardware, operating systems, data storage and application software, public warning systems, and radios. A more extensive list is in the notice of funding opportunity, so please take a look at that. And I'm going to hand this section over to Brian.
Thank you, Sonia. Good afternoon again, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about the criteria for determining eligible applicants at high risk of terrorist or other extremist attacks. This is part of your application process, and some of these risk assessments could be, may include, but is not limited to, identification and substantiation of prior threats or attacks by a terrorist or other extremist organization, network, or cell against the applicant or closely related organizations. Take into account the symbolic value of the site as a highly recognized national or historical institution that renders the site as possible target of terrorism. Role of the applicant responding to or recovering from terrorist attacks, and findings from previously conducted risk assessments, including threat or vulnerability. Allowable cost, and please bear with me, there's a lot of information here. I'll try to get through it as quickly as I can without falling over myself here. So the allowable costs, these are also listed within the program guidelines as well. Management and administration, M&A, cost up to 5% of sub-grant award are allowed. Indirect costs are allowable under this program as described in 2 CFR subsection 214. But you must have approved indirect cost agreement with your cognizant federal agency and provide copy with your application. Personnel, contracted security protection. In the IJ application, describe the number of personnel, frequency of use, hourly rate, etc. Planning activities related to the development of plans such as response plans, continuity of operations. Equipment costs for access control equipment, surveillance, excuse me, physical protective measures, radios and notification systems, etc. Training and exercises, security related, costs are allowed. Allowable training topics include physical and cybersecurity, terrorism, extremism awareness, employee preparedness, active shooter, and emergency first aid courses. Construction and renovation costs are allowed only with prior written approval from DHS/FEMA and may not exceed 15% of the award. Maintenance and sustainment related costs such as maintenance contracts, warranties, repair or replacement costs, upgrades, user fees as described in DHS FEMA policy FP 205-402-125-1. Unallowable cost, hiring of public safety personnel, i.e. you cannot go to a local police force and hire the police detail. General use expenditures, organization related cost. Operational overtime cost. Any guns, weapon systems, accessories, training, and ammunition are unallowable cost. General use expenditures. Development of risk vulnerability assessments, license plate reader system software, Knox boxes, facial recognition software, landscaping, and any pre-award cost, grant writer fees, development of IJ. The application process, the nuts and bolts of the program of the meeting today. So there's several pieces of information I want to get out to you. The first is the investment justification template. You submit this with your application package. The vulnerability assessment, it's also submitted with the application. The mission statement, the budget worksheet, which is new this year, and you're going to submit that with the application as well. The subgrantee risk assessment form, and that's going to be submitted along with the application, and the signature page, submit with the application. And you can see items 1 to 6 are required. They comprise the application package that is to be submitted to OGR. Additional information, number 7, application information form. This is also new this year. This provides us with a organizational information on FFY2023 funding request. Also allows us to keep a ongoing worksheet of the applicant so that we can keep all of your contact information in-house here. After all this is submitted on the 14th of April, we go into review mode, and I don't know exactly what the time frame is for that, but it'll be shortly after that, and we review EOPSS review team scoring. We'll review and score all eligible applications in accordance with Department of Homeland Security FEMA criteria. Once that is done, we're going to submit all applications to the Department of Homeland Security for federal review, final scoring, and award decisions. Please note that the Department of Homeland Security makes final award decisions in September 2023. Investment justification IJ requirements. Applicants must use the FEMA investment justification template form. A UEI, unique entity identifier number, is not needed up front. State administrative agency will not disqualify a nonprofit organization's FY2023 NSGP investment justification solely based on a nonprofit organization not having a UEI number at the time of submission. Please note, though, that a nonprofit organization must have a UEI number prior to receiving any awarded funding. All organizations must have a physical address, no post office box numbers. Only one site and one address per IJ. You can apply up for 3 different sites, but they all have to have distinct sites and distinct addresses. Organization must occupy a location at the time of application. It can't be under construction or renovation.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Tricia?
Yes, good afternoon again. I'm going to be reviewing the state review process with you. And that's going to involve, after you've submitted your application packet to Brian, we are going to verify the applicant eligibility and the completeness of the submitted documents. And after that, we are going to arrange team reviews and score all of the complete application packages using the NSGP scoring worksheet. And the eligible scored applications are submitted after they're reviewed and scored to FEMA. At that point, we go to the federal review process, which is the Department of Homeland Security. FEMA will review the investment justification form applications from each urban and state area, and the federal reviewers will score each IJ using the NSGP investment justification scoring worksheet. That will happen over the summer. The next area that I wanted to touch with you was the helpful hints. So we're going to begin by the investment justification and what it must include. We're looking for clearly identified risk, vulnerabilities, and consequences. If you have any descriptions of findings from a previously conducted vulnerability assessment, we would look for those to be connected. And then the details of any incident that include description, dates, I believe they referenced police reports earlier, the detailed budget. This section adds up to the total amount requested. So all of the amounts in your application packet should equal one another. And the NSGP federal funding request amount must match the NSGP total project cost. And the helpful hints will continue. The brief description of any supporting documents, such as police reports or photographs, are welcome and helpful. The explanation of how the investments proposed will mitigate or address the vulnerabilities identified from a vulnerability assessment. And then we are looking for you to establish a clear link with the investment and the core capabilities, which you can find at the National Preparedness Goal. All proposed activities, we're looking to see that they're allowable costs. And then in the milestone section, we're looking for a realistic timeline that considers environmental planning and historic preservation reviews if applicable to your project. You need to allow time for that to be completed. The description of the project manager or manager's level of experience is important because we want to make sure that the projects are moving along. And we're going to make sure that the IJ is complete and that it aligns with the vulnerability assessment. We're also looking, especially for you to not request more than the maximum allowable amount of $150,000. The IJ, again, just recapping, should be logical, reasonable, and attainable. We're going to ensure that all the requested expenditures are allowable and align with that vulnerability assessment. And as Brian had said earlier, nonprofits may apply without a UEI number, but to receive awarded funding, entities must have a UEI number, or funds will be placed on hold until the UEI number is submitted. And the threats, risk, vulnerabilities must tie to existing physical vulnerabilities in terrorism or extremism. Now I'm pleased at this time to introduce our federal partner at FEMA, our preparedness officer, Dennis Donahue, who's been so helpful to us. And I'll let Dennis take away the next slide.
Yes, thank you, Tricia. Some of the things that we look for, and before I start, I just want to mention that, as you are all aware, the NSGP program, it's a competitive program. So it behooves all applicants to provide the best possible application and not, send in something that has mistakes or unallowable requests or anything like that, because it's such a competitive program. Just a few mistakes like that, and it probably will cost your chance of receiving an award. So some of the things that I want to mention, and I think some of them have been mentioned before, the cost for grant writers is not allowable. It does say in the NOFO that pre-award costs are allowable, but they require approval, prior approval from FEMA. And usually we do not allow the costs of grant writers because it's a competitive grant. There's no guarantee you're going to receive an award. So you could actually claim like $1,000 for a grant writer and then receive the funds if it were to be approved, and then later not receive the award, and you would owe the federal government $1,000 back. So that's why we don't usually we don't go with the pre-award allowability. Also, for that same reason, any request for unallowable items may result in your application not being approved. So read the NOFO. The NOFO has everything that is allowable within the program. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for contracted security. We're looking for some type of emergency preparedness training. We're looking for closed circuit TVs, security cameras, both interior and exterior. So that's what we're looking for. We don't want to see any applications that include a request to send their members to a firearms class, or for a license plate reader, or for some other unallowable item. Those requests are not allowable, and your application will suffer. It'll be downgrade. It'll be marked off for having unallowable request. This one's important. You need to occupy the facility when you apply for the award. We do not fund projects for buildings under construction or renovation. So you should be in an occupied building. And the reason we do this is our way of getting more bang for the buck. We know that any security enhancements will have an immediate effect because the building's occupied and it's being used by the nonprofit, whether it's a house of worship, a hospital, a preschool, a school, whatever it is, it's occupied, and it's going to be a benefit to them once they get these security upgrades. Also, try not to apply for projects with the state and the federal NSGP programs simultaneously. That could lead to issues of supplanting and commingling of funds, which is not allowable in the federal grant world. We want to make sure that whatever projects you apply for are for the federal award and not another award. And finally, we do allow some change in scope and budget after the award is provided. However, there's no guarantee that that will be approved. So whatever you put in your application, to the best of your ability, make sure that that is what you want. That is the projects that are in your application is what you are expected to complete by the end of the period of performance. And I'll give you an example. I had a problem with a particular nonprofit who submitted an application, and then after the application was submitted, they put in a request to change the scope. And when they were queried as to why they wanted to change the scope, they said, well, we never looked at the application. It just was sent in from the grant writer, and we didn't really look at it. We just sent it in, and we didn't know that that was in there. That's the wrong answer. You should have multiple eyes on every application, not just the grant writer. It should be reviewed at your level, at your management level, and you should be able to understand exactly what type of projects you will have. That's the conclusion of my section. So we'll turn it back.
Thank you very much, Dennis. That's really important information to keep in mind, regarding this competitive grant opportunity. I just want to make you aware of some great resources that we have listed on the page. And again, we'll provide copies of the webinar to you, so you'll have these links. As Dennis said, the FFY2023 NSGP FEMA documents with FEMA's Notice of Funding Opportunity is available for review. We also wanted to note that due to some comments regarding our Notice of Funding Opportunity, we revised it this week, just clarifying what documents were needed at time of the application. So you'll notice there's some handouts listed in the webinar. So we added that as well. And it's on our website. So just wanted to make note of that. And the information on obtaining a UEI, Unique Entity Identifier Number, is listed as well. And Department of Homeland Security has some great websites. A lot of people ask us, well, how do I go about getting a vulnerability assessment? Do I have to hire a contractor? Is it expensive? There's several different ways you can get a vulnerability assessment. Sometimes your local police department will help you out. DHS's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has a very great security self-assessment that you can do. And also FEMA has what's called local protective security advisors in each region. So there's a link there. If they're available and have time, they can advise you on your vulnerability assessment. So really take advantage of the resources to help you with that. And at this time, we'll open up the questions and answers. You'll notice there's a box to your right where you can type in questions. And I'm going to have Kayla take it over from here. She will announce the question, and then we'll give you the answer. And again, if we don't have the answer at this time, we'll research the answer to the question and get back to you as soon as possible. Kayla?
Hello. So like Sonia said, you're more than welcome to type into the chat box any questions that you have from the presentation, and I'm here to read them and answer them to the best that I can or one of my colleagues can. So just whenever somebody's ready to put in a question, we are here to answer.
You must have did that great of a job, Kayla, huh?
I guess so.
Have any questions come in yet?
I'm not seeing any from my point of view.
Hey, Kayla, this is Dennis.
Hello. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Kayla. I just wanted to mention, I forgot in my short presentation, FEMA still has 4 informational webinars before the end of the period of performance, before the federal end of the period of performance. And I put those, I copied and pasted them into the chat, but I see it may be just for the organizers and panelists. If you go to the NOFO, the next 2 are actually before the end of your period of performance. One of them is on March 30th, and the second one is on April 4th. And then the 2 outliers are the 25th of April and the 4th of May. So if you want to have more questions, that's an opportunity to go on, and we have a similar webinar from the FEMA level.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for that.
Hi, Kayla. If you don't see the questions, I can see them on my end. Okay, I have one question here. It says, I have had trouble getting a UEI number. Is there anyone who I might be able to talk me through this process? Dennis, do you have any feedback on that?
Yes, UEIs, that is through the GSA, the General Services Administration, and SAM.gov, which the SAM stands for the System for Award Management, I believe. The those you have to go to those agencies and request assistance in getting your UEI. FEMA nor the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has any influence in assisting applicants in acquiring a UEI. You need to go directly to the folks at sam.gov and try to figure out what the problem is. I know this past year we had the requirement, and the rollout of the UEI was less than, I guess, it was less than desirable. It had quite a few technical problems, and we went into the fiscal year 22 awards with many holds on the awards because the applicant or the awardee did not have their UEI. Since that time, it appears that the vast majority of people have received their UEI. So it may take a little bit of time, but if there's an issue, you need to work with the folks at sam.gov in order to get that fixed.
Thank you, Dennis. We have another question. Can we apply for the federal NSGP for a certain scope of work if we already applied for the state NSGP with the same scope but never heard back? So I can answer that. We have had a delay in announcing our state Commonwealth Nonprofit Security Grant Program, but I'm hoping you'll hear by the end of this week. So that way you'll know, if you've been awarded or not. If you haven't heard by the end of this week, please check in with that program coordinator. Okay. Just looking for some other questions. Some security camera systems have facial recognition and license plate reader ability as part of the camera system software. Is that type of camera allowed? I'll let Dennis answer that.
The answer to that is no, that would not be allowed. We have a prohibition for facial recognition and camera and license plate readers for a couple of reasons. First, when you start doing facial recognition, you're getting into civil liberties, and because this is federal money, all of the projects must adhere to the DHS Office of Civil Rights, Civil Liberties, and Privacy, which means if you wanted that, we would have to go through a pretty lengthy process to get that approved. So that is why we do not allow. And license plate readers are generally a law enforcement tool. It's used by law enforcement to track stolen cars and criminals and terrorists and that sort of thing. That's the reason they're out there. We do not allow a nonprofit to use a license plate reader or facial recognition software for the privacy concerns that I alluded to. And finally, also, when you purchase your cameras, make sure you pay attention to the information in the NOFO, because there are camera systems which are manufactured by the People's Republic of China or Communist China that are not allowable because of certain software and hardware issues that could become a security threat. So make sure you read that and make sure that your cameras do not have facial recognition, don't have the license plate reader, and make sure that they are not prohibited cameras from China. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, in the past several years, I've seen many applications, and the vast majority have ordinary camera systems that are pan, tilt, and zoom, and they do everything necessary, and they don't have the prohibited systems with them. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Dennis. I have another question that says the comment about the state grant was confusing. Was there already a state grant this year? And the answer is yes. So we announced 2 state nonprofit grants. One was the Commonwealth Nonprofit Security Grant, and the second one was a new pilot program called the Commonwealth Nonprofit Security Personnel Grant Program. And those came out a few months back. We're just waiting for final award announcements, which will be made, I'm expecting by the end of this week. So hopefully that clears up any confusion there. And that way you'll know if you've been awarded state funds, and then you may not have to apply for federal funds for that project. So let me look at some more questions. I apologize. The questions are coming up in a very small box that have been difficult to read. Tricia, do you see any more that we missed? Oh, great. I can see them now. Thank you, Tricia, for your technical assistance. We have another question. Will this recording be released? Yes, we can provide a recording as well. And the presentation, we can send those by the end of the week. Yes, the information will all be sent by email. This webinar system provides us with a report at the end, which shows us who registered, what questions were asked, what the answers were. So we'll send out, again, the presentation, a Q&A, and the recording. Okay, where can we find specific information around what must be included in a vulnerability assessment? Again, if you look at that website from CISA, that was on the resource page, that's some really good information on developing security vulnerability assessment. What kind of equipment can be purchased? Regarding IT contingency operations. Again, if you look at the notice of funding opportunity, that information should be listed there. Okay, what is the policy on medical equipment such as defibrillators? Dennis, do you want to weigh in on that?
As far as medical equipment goes, some basic first aid kits are allowable. We encourage, as part of the training, if a nonprofit would like to conduct some type of first aid training, there's the one which includes rapid tactical first aid treatment, which includes the use of what we call clotting agents embedded in gauze. So that type of equipment would be allowable, basic first aid. Defibrillators are not allowable.
Thank you. I got a question that says, what is the percentage of grant awards? I'm not sure I understand that, if you want to clarify that. What if we were not awarded the state grant? Then again, feel free to apply for the federal award. As Dennis mentioned, we're just trying to avoid organizations applying for the same projects, which could be considered supplanting. Windows, those are allowable costs for under the equipment. A question came in that they received a grant in the past. Can we apply for another grant for cybersecurity? Again, just double check the notice of funding opportunity in terms of the cybersecurity allowability costs, and that is an allowable area. Another question, we have a patchwork aged phone system throughout multiple locations. Could this be used to upgrade our phone system?
Yes, Sonia?
Yeah, just thinking about that one.
Yeah, that's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
There's the one thing that you can use NSGP funding for are public address systems that would be used to declare some type of emergency or situation in a building or on a campus of buildings, and to advise people to shelter in place or evacuate or whatever the situation warrants. That is allowable, but to upgrade an entire phone system, I don't think that would be allowable.
Thank you. Okay, we have someone who said they don't think they'll be ready, to apply by April 14th. And when will the next cycle be? I believe it's pretty consistent. Dennis, you can back me up. It's usually in the spring, anywhere between, kind of March and April, that the federal notice of funding opportunities come out.
Right, Sonia, that's it's dependent upon, because this is appropriated money by statute, we cannot release the NOFO until Congress has passed and the president has signed the budget for that fiscal year. And that didn't happen until toward the end of December. And then from that point, we had 60 days to get it out on the street. So the NOFO was actually released in February 27th of 2023. And so what we're looking at, everything that you need for an application is in the NOFO. It gives you the directions. It tells you what to do. You need to have the vulnerability assessment completed. But if you have a vulnerability assessment completed, you should be able to complete the application, the investment justification within several weeks.
Great, thank you. I just want to thank Beverly. She had a tip that the SAM's help desk is awesome. And it can be reached at 1-866-606-8220. And again, we'll put that in the Q&A, and that'll help everyone get their UEI number if they don't have it already. So we'll make sure we send you that out. Again, we get comments about the deadline. Unfortunately, April 14th, 4 p.m. is the deadline. And the reason we have to have, time in between when our applications are due to our office, and then we have to turn around and do a grant review session, with multiple staff members. We review the IJ and all the supporting documentation. We put that together. And it's a very comprehensive review that then goes to FEMA. So we need time to really put that together. So that's why we have to have that deadline a little bit earlier than FEMA's deadline for our applications to them. Just going through the list here. Okay, it says, is it okay to occupy the property but lease it and not own it? Yes. Is there a requirement for the minimum number of years of the lease for this grant? I don't think there is, Dennis, right?
No, that as far as rental properties go, you have to coordinate with your landlord or the property management company on being able to make the improvements, the physical improvements in the building. And of course, you would need their permission because if they own the building, you're just a leasee. But if they sign off on it and you're leasing the building, then yes, that is allowable. And there's no minimum number of years you have to have on the lease.
Thank you. And I just want to say there's no silly question. Is wiring covered by the grant for access management systems and cameras? Yes, I believe any activity related to the installation, Dennis, is allowable.
Yes, that would be part of the installation cost. So overall, you're talking about the purchase of cameras, the installation, running of wires, setting up the system, and then ultimately having the vendor train the staff to actually use it.
Thank you. And another person wants to just clarify that police details are not allowed. And as Dennis mentioned, the hiring of law enforcement is not an allowable cost. You are allowed to hire, contracted security from a private vendor. Correct, Dennis?
Yeah, let me just clarify that a little bit. When we say law enforcement is cannot be hired, we mean they can't be hired directly. So if by chance you you want to procure the contract under the proper procedures by putting out a request for bids, and then hopefully you get companies or individuals that would bid on providing you that service. Certainly a private security company would fit the bill, but also police officers, off-duty police officers, they could bid as well. And I know in my community, I often see many police officers that are actually direct traffic in and out of houses of worship on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, depending on the denomination. And those individuals, if, as long as you don't, directly ask them, hey, can you do this? Because that would be sole sourcing, and that would not be a proper procurement policy or a proper procurement action. So we're looking at making sure that you follow the procurement procedures and see who actually wants to do the service. If there's a group of officers in your area that finds out about this and they apply, then they could certainly be considered to provide the security. Is that kind of cleared up a little bit?
That's great. Thank you, Dennis. And Amy wants to encourage everyone to start the UEI process early because it could take a few weeks. So definitely agree with that, Amy. Our parking lot security lights are not adequate. Would upgrading them be allowable? Yes, lighting is an allowable cost. Okay, someone asked about the number of applications we usually get. We usually get anywhere between 40 and 50 applications. And it just depends how many awarded the allocation that we get from the federal government. This year, the allocation for the state is 3.6 million, I believe. We applied last year and we're successful. Can we apply again? You certainly can apply again, but just keep in mind that a priority is given to first-time applicants, but that doesn't necessarily mean you won't be awarded. So you're definitely eligible. And then we have a question regarding the preference towards Made in America manufactured equipment with the grants. And I think what they're referring to is the BABAA, Buy America, the new policy. But Dennis, I believe that there was a waiver granted for projects under, is it $250,000?
Sonia, correct. And also BABA, which is the acronym.
I wasn't going to say it.
I know. I hate it as well. What that is for is critical infrastructure. So we're not. This program is not for doing security upgrades to critical infrastructure. It's for doing the security upgrades to nonprofit facilities. And so there's a waiver and you don't have to worry about that.
Great, thanks for the clarification. Amy just wants to confirm that they can use up to 5% of the nonprofit security grant for management and administration. That is correct. And please put that in your budget if you are requesting that amount. Just getting through a few more questions. If we don't have a UEI, can we still apply? As we said, you can apply for the grant, and hopefully by the time if you receive the award, you'll have the UEI number. But definitely, if you don't have one, please request that. And we have another question that says, we have not had a terrorist attack or threat, but could be a target in the future. Should we still apply? Of course, as you know, some of your organizations could be at risk based on your mission, your goal, your ideology. So even though you may not have an incident, you could still be at risk. So that's something you really want to identify in your application. We have some questions on some of the new documents that are required this year. Our fiscal department is requiring a budget worksheet. You'll notice it's an Excel format, and there's been some, glitches. If you're still having issues with the budget worksheet, please reach out to Brian directly, and we'll have his contact information for you at the end of the presentation. How recent does the vulnerability assessment need to be? Dennis, any guidelines on that?
I actually am one of the people who answer questions for the FEMA webinars, and that's a question that we receive pretty frequently. What I tell people is if you have had a vulnerability assessment done within the past 2 or 3 years, and there's been no changes to the physical layout of your facility, then it should be okay. You don't have to have a vulnerability assessment done every year. If you had one done in 2020 or 2021 and your place, your facility is the same as it was then use that.
Thank you. Will the application be available via email or on the website? It is available on the website, so you can access the investment justification there. And I believe we added it as a handout too in the webinar. We had a question about, they have some windows in their facility that are impossible to open, making escaping the sanctuary difficult. Would replacing these windows be an allowable cost? That would be allowable, correct, Dennis?
Yes, Windows, upgrade Windows is an allowable cost. And when I say upgraded Windows, that would be Windows that could be resistant to blast. There are certain Windows out there that are considered made out of safety glass. That means if there's a gunshot or an explosion, then it would not shatter, and shards would not injure the people who are on the inside. Also, we allow the film that goes over glass that does the same thing. It prevents the shattering from explosions and gunfire and such. So yeah, that windows would be allowable, as well as upgraded doors that if your door is not would not sustain somebody kicking it in or something like that, then upgrading the doors would be allowable too.
Thank you. Again, another question about hiring a security officer through an independent security company. That is allowable. Does the UEI number expire? I don't believe so. Dennis, that number kind of sticks with you for life, correct?
Yeah, it's the number that whenever you do business with the federal government, that number, the UEI, is the number that you will use. It is stays assigned to your organization, pretty much forever. That's your number, and you don't have to renew it. You don't have to apply for another one after 5 years. It stays there, and that's the how the federal government will track, assistance that has been provided to you or your organization, and it's how you would, whenever you do business with the federal government, you would use that number.
Thank you. A question about, do we recommend using a grant writer? The state and federal government, can't really recommend, any services or any vendors. So that would be a decision that you would make. Could we elaborate on the construction and renovation relative to the grant program? I think, Dennis, you have some good guidelines for that.
Yes, Sonia. As far as construction and renovation goes, it is allowable. It requires prior approval from FEMA, and the construction or renovation would have to address a known gap in your vulnerability assessment. And the couple of things that we often are asked about as far as construction projects, renovation projects, and as somebody who reviews the applications and such, one of the things that we receive are requests for a safe room. And I'm not exactly sure, I think having to do that, to construct a safe room in a facility is, I don't know if that's the best use of the grant funds, because if you need a safe room, that means that all your other security measures have failed. The cameras, the locks, the doors, the windows, the fence, and everything else. So we're looking at preventing something from happening to your facility. And a safe room is something that you would want if something happens to your facility. And it is allowable. However, it's expensive. You have to get a lot of permits. It takes a long time to accomplish. And at the end of the day, it may be better to just improve the security on individual classrooms rather than trying to construct a safe room somewhere in the facility. So improving your locking mechanisms on, if you have a preschool or a school, improving the doors and the locking mechanisms on all of the classrooms. So if there is an emergency, you have the ability to absolutely lock anybody out from coming into that classroom rather than spending $150,000 to build like a safe room within your facility. But it is allowable if you want to apply for it. You would have to get prior approval, and but that's it for security and renovation or construction and renovation. We don't see a lot of it. Occasionally we see something where an applicant would like to improve a foyer or something like that to prevent people from coming into the facility. That's probably a little less money, but still it has to have a connection to a gap in your vulnerability assessment.
Thank you, Dennis. We're coming up on 3:15, so I'm just gonna go through a couple of last few questions. Again, if your question wasn't answered, we may need to research that and get back to you, but we'll send a full Q&A by the end of the week. Can we use the grant for a firewall related to cybersecurity? I believe that would be allowable, Dennis, correct?
Yes, that would be allowable.
Great. We have a question, are window blinds or curtains allowable? I would think if they're related to security, Dennis, what are your thoughts?
I think I've actually seen this before, and they are not allowable.
Okay.
The window itself to actually prevent blast or some type of entry through the window to reinforce it, but the actual coverings, they're not allowable.
Okay. Updates to alarm systems allowable? I believe that would be. Okay, we have a question about indirect costs. Indirect costs are allowable, but you must provide with your application a copy of your indirect cost rate agreement with the cognizant federal agency. So just remember that. I remember, you may recall, Dennis, we had an organization post-award who tried to have indirect costs reimbursed, and it was not allowed because they didn't provide it at the time of application.
Right, and one thing about indirect costs, any indirect costs that you claim. So say you your ward is $100,000 and you have an indirect cost rate of 15%, then that's $15,000 you will not be putting toward your security projects. Indirect cost rates are there mainly to cover administrative costs, such as costs associated with utilities, the maintenance of the building, certain things like that, and they are allowable. But we do provide 5%. So if you do want to have some type of funding for managing the award, if you just take the M&A, which is 5%, you've got $95,000 left for the award. If you want to take indirect costs at 15%, and some of them go as high as 20%, then you're left with $85,000. So it's a big difference. And although it is allowable, I'm not sure exactly what the cost would be used for to meet the objectives, the goals and objectives of the program, which is to reinforce the physical security of vulnerable nonprofit facilities. So.
Thank you. Are houses of worship prioritized, or are all organizations equal for this grant? I believe, the organizations FEMA deems most at risk would be the priority, correct, Dennis?
I believe it's in the NOFO, the actual scoring scheme for organizations that are faith-based versus secular, and also organizations that have received the award in the past versus those who have never received the award. So there's some different bonus points that are allowed in those situations, and I believe that's in the NOFO. So check the NOFO for that information.
Great, and I believe that we come to the end of our questions. Again, if you didn't get an answer yet, we just may have to research that and get back to you, but we'll put together a great Q&A and send that out at the end of this week. And I just want to leave you with the program contact information. For all questions and submission of application by 4 p.m. on Friday, April 14th, 2023, to our program coordinator, Brian Nichols, at brianpnichols@mass.gov. He can be reached at 781-535-0101. Again, I want to thank all of you for attending. Our special guest, Dennis Donahue of FEMA, and our Homeland Security staff. Any final remarks? Great. Again, we'll send all the information out to those who registered for the webinar by the end of the week. Thank you very much for attending.